There are a number of myths that we all grew up hearing about regarding religion, especially people from my generation, Generation X. And one of those myths is that religions are all the same, that they basically teach the same thing, that they all have one path that leads to the same place. And the idea that religions are all the same is really not true. Religions are very different. They teach very different things, and the results are very different. The similarities are very superficial, and so I wanted to write a book that would, first of all, kind of tackle that idea that religions are all the same and show that that's not true. Another idea we grew up hearing about a lot is that religions are the reason for the world's problems, that it's a source of tension and that the world would be a better place if there was no religion. And that is definitely not true. Once again, we owe a lot in this world to the many things that religion teaches people. One of them, aside from helping to structure society and infusing morality into civilizations, is that most religions do teach a lot of tolerance for people of other faiths. And many places in the world would have been in constant warfare if it were not for the tolerance taught. And in the book I mention India as a place where you have many very different people, but because religion has been a source of tolerance, it has enabled that civilization to last for thousands of years. And another idea that people often will suggest is that religion is unimportant in global affairs. When you look at the way the world works, it's economics that matters, it's politics. But I've always believed that religion is just as important as any of those other things. And sure enough, I think after September 11th, it has become very obvious that religion can have the power to affect countries in a way far greater than we could have ever imagined probably before September 11th. So this book I've written has a few goals. One is to just show the power of religion, for better or for worse. Overall, I think religion is a great thing, obviously, and certainly Christianity is the religion that I adhere to, and I think it is the absolute truth. But there are also difficulties that arise with religion, and so this book just wants to make the point that religion is powerful. I also wanted to explain the differences between world religions so people get a better understanding. But I didn't want it to be a dry textbook where people would get bored reading many different theologies and comparing them, because there are many books like that on the market and they can be kind of hard to read. So I wanted to write a book in which I could bring the subject new life. So what I do is in each chapter I travel to a different country or countries where there is a dominant faith that is practiced. And I go and I meet the people there, and I learn about their faith, and then I discuss how those religions are affecting the culture and politics and economics of the particular 10 countries that I visit. And hopefully by making the book not just a book on theology, comparative religion, but making it a travel log, it'll be much more interesting to people. And I hope it is a very easy book to read that is educational but is interesting and inspiring as well for Christians and non-Christians. All my life I've loved traveling. I grew up traveling as a missionary kid. I've always had the desire to see as much of the world as possible, and I've been very fortunate to see many different places. After my mother died in 1991, I really made it a point to travel even more and do as much as I could. And so over the next 10 years, I visited many, many countries, and a lot of those travels from that period are what you find in the book, Passport of Faith. I had many memories, but I couldn't include them all in the book. Some of them, some of my best memories have taken place in countries that I don't mention in the book. And then there are other memories that were in the book, but they were eventually cut out, and rightfully so, because they didn't have much to do with the subject at hand. And Even though there were some good stories, they didn't always make the printed page. One of the most interesting experiences for me, and I write about it in chapter 2 of the book, was going to Japan for the first time. I've since been there many times, but the first time was the most interesting because it was the first time I had been to a country that was not a third world country. And so to go from the United States, a first world country, to a country that on outward appearances seemed even more modern, even more sophisticated, was really quite a shock. And actually, that's how some of the ancient explorers from for Portugal and England felt as well when they first landed in Japan 500 years ago. But that's something I wanted to capture in that first chapter about this very orderly, efficient, clean society, and what a shock it is to go to modern-day Tokyo and see how well everything functions in that society, at least on the surface. Of course, internally and at a deeper level, and I think at the level within people's hearts in Japan, there are a lot of problems and a lot of questions that have been left unanswered. It is a society that is struggling with its identity in this modern world, but that's not what you see when you get off the plane. And so that's kind of what I wanted to capture in that first chapter. Another great memory I have was something that occurred in Egypt. It didn't make the book, but I went out with my wife and her family. We went on a felucca, which is these ancient sailing vessels that the ancient Egyptians used to use, and they still use those on the Nile. And we went out just before sundown. The Nile's a very big river, so we were in the middle of it, and on both sides you could see the city of Cairo, which is very impressive. And as the sun was getting ready to go down, we heard the call to prayer. And all around us, we could see the buildings and the mosques of Cairo. And each mosque has a tower. It's called a minaret, where the muezzin, that's the man who does the call to prayer, makes that very interesting sound, that cry out to call all people on their knees. It happens 5 times a day. And since we were at sundown, all of a sudden, from all throughout the city, we could hear the call to prayer coming from all the different mosques. And it's not in sync, so it gave it kind of an eerie feeling as you heard the whole city hear the cries of the muezzin. But it was one of the most fascinating moments, and it felt like I was being transported back in time. Another interesting memory that I didn't include was when I first went to the Great Wall of China. I had a very unique opportunity. The Great Wall of China has many different locations where you can go and take pictures. But there's one particular location that you often see in postcards and on TV and in movies. It's the most famous location of the Great Wall, the most famous section. And it's usually very, very busy. But the day that I got there, it was a perfectly blue day. It was very, very cold. It was December. And there was absolutely no one on the Great Wall of China. It was just me and my camera. And so I couldn't believe my incredible luck to have the entire Great Wall of China to myself. So I quickly tried to set up my camera to get a picture of me standing on the Great Wall all alone. But I started having problems with my tripod. And I sat there messing with my tripod for probably 20 minutes trying to fix it so I could get this great shot, which was stupid because by the time I figured out how to get the shot, this busload of Koreans showed up and they just covered that wall, and I lost what would have been a really incredible photograph of just myself on the Great Wall of China. It's very challenging to write about religions and world religions right now because, of course, we're living in a politically correct era where everyone, especially in academic circles, is wanting to make sure that everyone gets along. The multicultural agenda is strong. And that's good. That's a positive thing. We do all want to get along. But at the same time, it's not a good idea to minimize the differences between religions and cultures, because then you allow things to fester and problems not to get solved and confronted. So writing about religion is a complicated thing. I was inspired by Samuel Huntington's approach in Clash of the Civilizations, which is a book that I discuss in the introduction of my own book. The Clash of Civilizations argued that we were entering into a new era where, instead of ideology like communism versus capitalism, that most of the tensions in the world would revolve around ideas of culture and ethnicity and religion. And that is something that no one wanted to hear. So it was very brave of Professor Huntington to write such a thing. And he's right. The trends that we see bear out. His thesis is correct, but it's something that people still do not want to discuss very much. But I think it's important that when we look at religion and when we look at cultures in the world, we have to deal with the world as it is, not as how we want it to be. Japan is a country where there are many scholars who will not write anything negative about Japan. They want to lift it up as this perfect society, this model of something other than the West that can succeed. So it's very tricky at times to write anything critical about Japan. In my chapter on Japan, which is the second chapter, I do write some critical things about that culture and that society. It's not because I have anything personal against the Japanese or anything. It's the country I probably admire the most in the world. But every country has its faults. As the Bible would say, everyone falls short of the glory of God. I believe every culture falls short of the glory of God, even if they have valuable things within their culture. And so there was a group of scholars in the 50s that were very influential that wrote Japanese history in a way that no one could ever be allowed to say anything negative. That's not what I wanted to do in this book. I wanted to tackle real issues and real problems that we are all facing in this new world order. For instance, in the chapter on Islam is a chapter I'm very proud of because that is a very politically charged subject right now. But I wanted to write a good neutral subject that would chapter that would highlight some of the challenges. I even asked a very non-politically correct question: is Islam inherently violent? And I discussed some of the things that the whole Islamic region in the world is dealing with right now. We're always very good at critiquing the U.S., especially in universities in Europe and the United States. It's very easy for anyone to write a very negative book about America, but it's not always so easy to deal with the real issues about other countries in the rest of the world. The Islamic world has some very difficult questions that they need to wrestle with. The amount of wars that they are involved in, the amount of Muslims who are being killed right now, not by Westerners, but by Muslims, the stagnancy of their economies, the continued marginalization of women, the lack of educational opportunities provided for their children, the indoctrination of children in countries like Pakistan and Indonesia. The Middle East and the Islamic world is facing a real challenge right now. It may not be a clash of civilizations, as Samuel Huntington called it. It could be a clash within a civilization, and that civilization is Islam, but it is affecting the rest of us. How Islam deals with this current struggle that it is waging against itself and the world is going to have a huge impact on all of us, no matter where we live. And it's because of something like that I felt that in this book we really needed to talk about not just the strengths of different religions and different countries, but about their weaknesses as well. Because in this new era of globalization, the problems in one country will affect all of us.